An active pattern stretching up with potential development in the tropics combined with a mid-latitude cyclone likely to bring high impacts to the United States. Welcome in, folks. Happy Monday, October 13th, and hopefully we're having an all right day out there. A lot to talk about. We've got the tropics I'm continuing to track. I'm also tracking our next storm system back home, which really beginning now for many of us, but could last through this week and then get kind of a bump up here by the time we get towards next weekend, which could even bring the return of severe weather. Now, with all that said, because we've got a lot of track, I do ask, if you haven't already, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell for the latest notifications. Always helps you stay up to date here on the channel. It's free. To do all those things doesn't cost you a penny and helps both of us out, so might as well do it, right? All right, let's go ahead and get right on into things and try to make this as efficient as possible. We'll start with just a loop here of the tropics combined with the eastern U.S. You can see there's one big storm trying to work on in across the country, showing up on our latest GFS model, and then the Caribbean tries to come to life around 10 or so days from now. So those are really the two big storylines I'm tracking here throughout the video, and will definitely be something that you see plenty of over the next probably 20-ish minutes or so. Now let's briefly go ahead and start with the tropics. So we're going to start here, and then we'll eventually get to that mid-latitude cyclone likely on the way later this week. Quick overview of how things look out there. Tracking a couple areas. This is officially Tropical Storm Lorenzo, just got designated. I'll save you the trouble on that one. Not going to be a problem. We'll turn up out to sea and will not impact anybody. But this wave behind it rolling off of Africa does have my attention for potential development, especially in that 7 to 10 day range. But excuse me, could get an early head start here as well, and we'll talk about why that is throughout the video. And then we've got this big old leftover bit of our nor'easter from earlier this week, which is finally pulling away and not really bringing any big concerns to anybody now that we're getting on into the end of Monday and looking ahead towards our Tuesday. But let me know what you saw from that storm. Again, some areas got hit pretty hard, so would love your reports on what you saw and where you're watching from. Now, I'll briefly show you Lorenzo here. Again, not a problem. Going to stay a tropical storm. Could maybe try to find hurricane status, but the main forecast from the National Hurricane Center is for this to stay a tropical storm and will strengthen over the next couple of days. But really, Lorenzo not going to be a problem. What could be a problem, though, is what I showed you in the Caribbean. So let's go and analyze that area a little bit more and try to dive into how it could develop. Well, tropical Atlantic really just not giving up, and normally this time of the year we're done with the MDR and we're focusing on the Caribbean and Gulf. This year, not really the case. The Caribbean and Gulf haven't had a storm yet. Again, I'm watching. Maybe we do get one last hurrah. If it happens, it's going to be from this little area you see down here on the bottom right, and we'll be breaking that down. But first, let me show you Lorenzo. Again, that's over here on the left. Not the ugliest tropical storm I've ever seen. Definitely not the prettiest either, but you can pretty clearly see that cyclonic rotation, and you can see how it's already pulling up to the north and getting plenty of moisture here out of the subtropics. So you can see kind of this feed of a pretty moist atmosphere into this system. So going to have some room to run here. Definitely, like I said, not the ugliest tropical storm I've ever seen. Now, the wave behind it, definitely very early on in the stage of any potential development. Now, already trying to keep some consistent convection here. And if it manages to do that for a prolonged period of time without dry air intruding or wind shear intruding, could become a storm earlier on. And some of our models do suggest that, but it is, running against just time and climatology. This time of year, usually, we're not really tracking storms in this part of the Atlantic that often. With that said, though, that doesn't mean it can't happen and that it hasn't happened before. This one very well could become a storm early on. Lorenzo just did it, so why not this one? Another thing it's got going for it is a pretty moist environment compared to what we normally have. We've had a lot of dry air outbreaks over the North Atlantic. Right now, though, and a pretty big pocket of higher end moisture out here as this rolls off of sub-Saharan Africa and into a pretty favorable environment. Also, wind shear pretty low right now. That's why it's trying to get its act together, and we'll be timing out if those ingredients stay here for the long haul here in just a moment. Let me remind you of this. The waters out here are plenty warm enough to support a system. Lorenzo right in here, kind of in not cool waters, but cooler than explosive levels of warmth, but we'll kind of ride that, and that's why it's going to weaken eventually. It's going to run into some cooler sea surface temperatures. The system behind it, though, the one that we're watching, going to kind of ride this belt of warmer waters. And notice out here into the Caribbean, as we've been telling you for days and weeks now, that's where the really warm water is. So if it can just hold on long enough to get there, I think that's when kind of everyone's interest should peak a little bit and kind of perk up. But not to say it doesn't have a chance to develop even out here into the MDR. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at some model guidance and kind of break down what the odds of that happening are. I'll start with the American model, and you can see Lorenzo showing up pretty well here in the data. There's the storm, again, churning away, trying to strengthen and getting that designation today as a tropical system. Behind it, the other wave not really showing up all that much. You could see kind of the rain from it moving through the subtropics there, and then eventually tries to become something right around here. Notice how it starts to get its act together down near the Caribbean. So the GFS has backed off from the idea of this developing sooner, still develops it, but waits until it gets to the Caribbean. And I think it's probably onto something with that general thinking. As you can see, the wave again struggling once more, and Lorenzo just spinning away into the Atlantic, and even 10 days from now out there, but not bothering anybody outside of some ship captains having to avoid it. Now, not all model guidance suggests that that's how this is going to end up. If you look at the Canadian model, a very different outcome. Let's back it up for you and get it to right here. So here's Lorenzo. You can see it right there pretty well. Here's the wave behind it. The Canadian much more aggressive in the near term with that secondary wave. And by the way, I'll mention, if I didn't earlier, the National Hurricane Center hasn't even tagged it yet. So they're not very confident at all that what I'm about to show you is going to be the outcome. But it's a possibility, lower end possibility, but a possibility nonetheless. Canadian spins this up quickly, takes advantage of that moist atmosphere and low wind shear right now, and really spins this up. And we've got a hurricane, only about 5 days from now. This is this Saturday. You can see the Canadian having a compact, tight tropical cyclone there, working right through the main development region, and then gets towards the islands just north of them here, right around a week or so from now. This is next Tuesday, having a named system there, and then kind of, runs out of time. This is as far out as the model goes. So, a different scenario. Let's try to find a tiebreaker. What about old reliable, the European model? What does it show? Well, it shows, what the GFS shows. Doesn't really develop this one in the near term. Keeps it, going and maintains the circulation enough that it doesn't die. And that's, again, the important thing. Because if it doesn't die now in the MDR and it gets to the Caribbean, all bets are off, and it could really have room to run there. But doesn't develop it over the next week here over the MDR. Keeps it going, keeps maintaining convection, just doesn't fully become a named storm until, much like the GFS, it gets to the Caribbean. So that's kind of the general thinking among the models right now. We've got the highest end scenarios that this thing doesn't become a storm, but survives in the sense that it remains a wave and has some sort of circulation through the MDR. But there is that lower outside chance that it develops quicker, like the Canadian shows. And then, we would have something to track a lot sooner besides Lorenzo, which again, isn't really a problem for anybody. So let's show you those environmental conditions that are driving this, and I'll tell you why it may struggle in the near term, and then why, if it can get to the Caribbean, it really could have room to run. Here are the upper level winds currently over the system, and we do have a belt of stronger winds here to the north, but remember this one well down to the south, so in a relatively favorable upper level pattern currently, and honestly it kind of keeps that. Remember, it's going to keep moving west here over the next couple of days, and wind shear just really not that strong down here into the Atlantic right now, so that could help it form in the near term. I think that's what the Canadian sees, but climatology suggests otherwise, and this one again has a ways to go before it has well enough to find center to really take advantage of this environment. It keeps that though, and notice the upper level pattern stays favorable. This is by about a week from now, probably more about 5 to 6 days. This big upper level anticyclone or upper level divergent wind field here is going to keep tracking with the storm for the most part, meaning that's a favorable pattern. Remember, when we get winds that spread apart in the upper levels, that creates a void, and that means something has to fill that void, and usually that happens with surface winds coming together, and that's what a lot of the models suggest is going to happen in the upper levels. Dry air wise, though, it's in a favorable pocket right now, but there is going to be another outbreak of dry air to the north expected. Notice all of these drier colors. Here's our X, here's our storm. This is by this coming Friday morning, and or maybe this is the storm. Either way, it's got dry air around it. You can see, trying to keep that marsupial pouch on its own, meaning that kind of low level defined warm and moist circulation, but dry air nearby. So that could also hinder things in the near term. But like I mentioned, I think it's once it gets towards the Caribbean that it could have a better chance. Now, here's the system right around 7 to 10 days from now, still dealing with some dry air around. You can see some dry air chasing in, some dry air up into the Gulf, at least if the model is right on what happens 10 days from now. Obviously, that's a ways away, so who knows exactly. But that upper level anticyclone is still there. And remember, the ocean temperatures are just off the charts here. So you've got divergent flow over this thing. You've got very warm sea surface temperatures. And if it keeps a moist enough atmosphere, I don't really see much to stop this thing from forming. Again, if it can survive this long and even get into the Caribbean. That's the big question. And, something that it could be a real possibility. All right, that's the environment. Let's take a look at some ensemble data now, and you'll see that they also agree that once this hits the Caribbean, it's got a shot to form. Here are the European ensembles, and notice, there's a bit of a signal here. I told you yesterday, there's kind of three levels to this. There is really nothing, there's noise, and then there's a signal. We're kind of between the noise and signal range right now, so not a slam dunk. And even if we had a signal, it wouldn't be a slam dunk anyway. The models have been pretty bad this year, honestly, in the long range. But at least some noise out here that the system starts to develop into the Caribbean. The European ensembles seem pretty, maybe not certain, but a lot of members. I'd say at least 40% have something in that range getting going. The GFS ensembles also have something in that range. Some of them still try to form it earlier, like the Canadian, and if that were the case, then it would likely have an easier path to curve out to sea. If it waits till it gets to the Caribbean to form, though, obviously at that point, I mean, there's land on every side. There's Central America here, there's South America, and then all of the islands of the Caribbean as well. That could potentially be in line, and who knows, maybe the United States well on down the road, but that seems like an unlikely scenario, at least right now. What about the AI models? Well, the AI models not as excited, but still a couple members saying, if this thing finds the Caribbean, it could have a shot to develop thanks to those warm sea surface temperatures, the deep warm sea surface temperatures, or I guess sea temperatures at that point, it's on the surface if it's going deep. And then, like I said, the upper level pattern looks favorable. And if it can hold on to enough moisture, absolutely could become something. All right, that's your update on the tropics. That's really the only system I'm watching right now for potential development. But as I mentioned, we've got another system that's going to cross the country that is absolutely going to bring impacts here a little bit sooner in time. Well, all reliable, the vorticity map, one I always use here on the channel, and going to be very useful this week. Here's the leftover energy that produced our nor'easter. Again, that's fizzling out and moving offshore anyway, as it is being a progressive trough, as we call it, meaning it's just continuing to move. Here's the big story, though. We've got just a big old fishing hook here working into the West Coast really right now and into tomorrow. This is a lot of energy. It's a lot of mid-level spin, and it's going to bring some pretty rough conditions into the Rockies over the coming days, then escapes the Rockies, starts to lift north, but then another trough comes in, another big fishing hook, if you will. And anytime you see a fishing hook on the map, it's not a good sign if you want easy to forecast and simple weather. That one tries to work on into the East Coast, or at least the Midwest, we'll say, and then towards the East Coast by this weekend. So about 5 to 7 days from now, and then it just keeps on coming and coming with these troughs as you would start to expect this time of year. Now, what does that mean, though, for the forecast? Well, let's show you the European model. You can see this big system working into the West Coast. We're going to have a rainy day or two into San Francisco, LA. Huge Sierra Nevada snow out of this one. We've got big Rocky Mountain snow continuing, lower elevation rainfall. Then this becomes a system that tries to work up through the Midwest by Thursday, Friday. Map starts to get a little boring for a little while, but then a new system develops as you get that reinforcing shot of cyclonic vorticity, and you get another big storm that would be a pretty big storyline, I'd say, here by the time we start getting into this coming weekend, rides up through the East Coast, and then that's the story on the European. What about the GFS models? Does it show the same thing? Well, let's take a look. It starts pretty similar. We've got this big storm working into the West Coast, like I said, Rocky Mountain snow, lower elevation rainfall, and continuing. And then, like the European, gets it through the Midwest, not overly strong, but enough to bring some rain. And then you get that reinforcing shot, but it just happens differently. And thus, we get a completely different looking kind of system to start to work into the east by this coming weekend. But I will mention here, we've got the 540 line making its welcome return for all of our snow lovers. That means anything, that precipitation that falls inside that 540 line, generally more likely than not would be frozen. But you can see the GFS has mostly rain. So either way, a sign of changing seasons. Now, all that's great and all, but what in the world does this actually mean for the forecast? Well, let's show you a couple things, then I'll let you go. Well, as you saw there, we've got high uncertainty, but we've got enough confidence from the Storm Prediction Center that they are highlighting an area for potential severe weather to return. It's been a while, so don't forget that we can get severe weather even in fall. Oftentimes, it's a secondary severe weather season right behind spring. Highlighted areas, southern Illinois, all the way down to the northern border of Louisiana, down towards Arkansas, Texarkana, southeastern Oklahoma, all of Arkansas, Memphis, Cape Girardeau. We've got Sikeston, Missouri, St. Louis, Paducah, Kentucky, all sorts of cities I could keep naming here in that area for potential severe weather. This is day 6, so this would be for this coming Saturday, so the start of this weekend. And again, we've got a lot of uncertainty here in the models, but enough aligning here that potentially we could see some severe weather becoming a more likely scenario. Also, we're going to get a ton of snow into the Rockies. So I know many of you aren't watching in the Rockies. If you happen to be, or you happen to have a ski trip, let me know in the comments, and always good to know where you're watching from. But I mean, we're talking a foot plus here, especially into the Sierra Nevada range. I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 feet plus there into the high peaks. So, a lot of the passes through there are going to get clobbered pretty good over the next couple of days. That's what we know right now, and I will quickly pull up one more thing. I didn't pull this map up, but thought about it, and probably should be something I show, just to give you an idea of the uncertainty here. Here's the European ensemble members. Again, pretty high confidence right up in here. We get a storm by Thursday, Friday. But for the secondary storm, I mean, the models are all over the place right now. Really, there could be low pressure anywhere in this circle by the time we get to this coming weekend. So that leaves a lot of room to be desired in terms of accuracy. But again, confidence growing, some sort of storm will be there. It's the exact impacts, the strength, the timing that we still need to figure out. Alrighty, folks, so that's all I've got for you on this Monday. Again, if you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments. And by the way, had a great weekend growth-wise on the channel. A ton of views and new subscribers across 50,000. In fact, I think we're about to cross 51,000. So the train keeps moving, and 100K is the next stop. Maybe we can get there by tomorrow, right? No, just kidding. But again, we are working towards that goal. All right, y'all have a great one. Stay safe, and I'll see you all next time.